If you've used PTZ cameras in the past, you know how great they are for following the action even when you don't have a cameraman. But if you've never used a PTZ camera, you don't know what you're missing. So we're going to aim to fix that because today we're talking about the AIDA PTZ IP series. It's a new line of PTZ cameras from the company that brings you all of the amazing box cameras that you're probably familiar with from these other videos. This is the product here, and it is amazing in the PTZ camera world that this product brings together so many features and facets that are present only in higher end cameras in this one low cost camera solution. So let's take a look at what makes the AIDA PTZ IP amazing. Physically, the unit has many common connectors, but what makes the PTZ IP unique is that it has all of these different kind of connection methods all in one. So here we have the RS-232 legacy serial control, HDMI, SDI. Next to that is USB 3.0, and then the LAN connection supports both IP in the form of RTSP and RTMP, as well as NDI HX. A little bit down further from that, kind of hidden by the network cable here, is a 12-volt input, but as you can see, we're not using it because we're actually taking in power via PoE. So the one LAN connection makes for a single cable that converts power, video, and control all through one cable, which makes wiring it up and deploying it very easy. On the front, we have an indicator for indicating activity, or optionally also tally light if supported. And right now what I'm doing is I'm actually controlling the unit using the included remote. One of the other things that I want to show you on the front side is the absolute quietness of the unit. One of the neat things about this camera is that it has, for its price, extremely high quality motors. And the other neat thing that those extremely high quality motors get you is complete silence. So I can make it move back and forth. It does a nice ramp up and slow down. So it isn't a jerky motion, which means that you can actually follow this camera live much more easily, use this camera to follow action live much more easily than if you're just doing offline presets. So you don't get that same jerky motion that you might in other cameras at similar price points. So this camera actually performs like a camera, easily twice its cost, and it brings together all of those different input functionalities, having the SDI, HDMI, IP, NDI, and USB control all rolled into one device. Next, let's take a look at the web UI. So I'm going to log in here to the IP address of the camera and enter in my username and password, and then I'm going to allow Flash to play and go over to my settings, which will then let me go through and change all of the different things about the AIDA camera that we can control. And that includes a great number of things. How its video is encoded, the image parameters, RTMP settings for streaming to places like Facebook and YouTube, Ethernet configuration, firmware resetting, etc. So if I want to go through and adjust how the image is being encoded, I can have two RTSP streams encoded in H.264, H.265, a main and a sub, main profile, baseline, or high profile. And then this gives you what the address is, and then the resolution that we're encoding at, bit rate, frame rate, whether it's constant bit rate or variable, etc. And if we want to go into the image parameters, this gives us the controls over the camera's lens. So for example, if we wanted to have manual focus instead of autofocus, I would be able to use this control, for example, to adjust the focus, to leave it set on a particular depth if we had a scenario where we had different things moving in and out, but we wanted to keep the focus on the same point. But autofocus is great. It's going to do its best to constantly keep track of your face or whatever is most prevalent in the scene. Exposure. Right now I have the exposure set to manual, but you can put it on auto and it will try to adjust accordingly depending on how bright the scene is. You can, under manual, you can adjust things like shutter, flicker, gain, iris, brightness. You can set it to iris priority, so you leave the iris set at a certain rate and it adjusts things like the gain and the shutter to match it, or shutter priority or brightness priority. But auto is generally good. Manual, of course, gives you all the settings that you might imagine. White balance, also auto is good unless you're in a situation where you want to, you know it's going to be indoor or outdoor, auto tracking, and then of course manual settings let you adjust the color individually, which you can mess up, but you can also use it to get your color ideal if there's something in the scene which might be fooling the auto adjusting of the white balance. The image settings, we can mirror, we can flip, we can mirror and flip. That's if you're going to put your camera upside down. Backlight compensation if you have a bright light behind you like I do, but we actually don't need it in this case. Gamma, I like to leave gamma at 0. The image, in my opinion, is going to look the best that way. Wide dynamic range, that gives you a little bit of extrasensory perception. Image settings, these are standard saturation, brightness, sharpness, contrast, noise reduction. I have 3D noise reduction set to auto. You can set it to certain amounts. Noise reduction is great if you're in a really low light environment, which is going to generate some noise. For example, if you have the gain turned up, 2D and 3D noise reduction in combination is great, but for the most part, 3D noise reduction on auto is going to be sufficient, and that's how the system ships. So that is some of the settings that we can go through in the web UI for controlling the camera. The AIDA PTZ IP series works in so many different ways, whether you're talking about SDI for traditional broadcast switchers, HDMI for prosumer models, NDI workflows for TriCaster, vMix, and other NDI applications, USB for Zoom or Skype or BlueJeans. You can see that there are many different workflows that this applies to. Couple that with the extremely fine motoring on this, meaning that it's quiet. It can fit into your house of worship or your conference room or your studio without distracting your talent with the noisy PTZ motors, and you can use more shots on air because you've got that smooth ramping motion that means that you're not getting that jerky PTZ movement. AIDA's website is aidaimaging.com. All the specifications for the camera can be found there, and I am Eric Pratt. Thanks again for spending some time watching with us today.